Hello, all. It is Tanisha from Fare Niente. This is the third time I have recorded this particular uh, story, or let's just call it a podcast, because I really will be flipping these over to be podcasts because the program that I've been using for some reason kept bungling my different recordings around and throwing them in different places. And so I had to delete and scrap the whole thing, not once, but twice, and start all over again. So I'm awake this morning and I really wanted to get this information out because I feel that it's very important. And it's basically the foundation to some of the things that I'm going to be talking about in the future. But before we get started on the topic, I wanted to let you know that I finally came up with a name for my YouTube channel and the overall umbrella of what I'm going to be doing. It is going to be called Fare Niente. Far Niente. I'm not going to use Far Niente because there is a wine company that is using that. But Fare Niente comes from the phrase dolce far niente, which is Italian. That means the sweetness of doing nothing. And as you all know, I lived in Italy not once, not twice, but three times over a 3 year time period. And I absolutely love the language and I love a lot of their phrasing and what they mean by it. And the sweetness of doing nothing is kind of in a way like saying, just surrender to the process of life and just let life be, and let it be a sweet and beautiful thing. We don't have to constantly be fighting, but just relax, just chill, just surrender and be at peace with who you are. This doesn't mean that you're going to be lazy. It just means that right now, what you're doing is allowing life to be what it is. And then in the process of being mindful of where you are and what you want, you get to change things as you will. So, Fare Niente. So welcome to Fare Niente Salon Topics. And today we're going to be talking about what are scripts and the power of narratives. I'm sure many of you have heard the story or the phrase the power of narratives. And what do I mean by this? Well, it's definitely been proven psychologically, scientifically, whatever you want to call it, that the stories that we tell about ourselves or about our history or about our lives actually are the things that create uh, our lives, our experience on this plane, but they even go deeper than that. Because if you think about scripts is basically what you give a team of actors when it comes to a storyline, and they are told what their characters are supposed to do, what they're supposed to say in each and every moment of the role that they're playing in this particular script. And what we know about scripts is we tend to inherit behavior patterns from our environment, whether it's our family, whether it's our culture, whether it's our ethnic group, where it's our national country or religion. And we tend, when we are not mindful, and this is where mindfulness comes in, to basically play a role in a script that has already been created for us in a system that has been created to basically keep us in a box or destroy us. And so today I just wanted to talk to you about what scripts are and what the power of narratives and how you yourself can be the master of your fate. And again, that doesn't necessarily sound like I'm saying anything around like being in control, because we're not in control of anything. The only thing we control is our response to what's happening to us or the world around us. But your mindset, your willingness to be vulnerable, your willingness to take off masks and to strip off things that don't serve you or that are not true to who you are, will allow your life to flourish in the way that you believe it should. And so I wanted to start there. So, like I said, what are scripts and what are narratives? Narratives basically are stories that we tell people about ourselves, or stories that may play in the back of our mind based on what someone has told us about ourselves. Sometimes we take on things that people say, and scripts are basically, they're basically the same thing, but scripts are very a little bit more nuanced. It's not nuanced. It's a little bit more. It drills it down even more, because scripts are basically um, behavioral patterns that we inherit from our families, our loved ones, our culture, our nationality, our religion, where we end up, if we're not conscious to it, playing a role in those scripts or narratives without much choice or thinking about it. And so how do we inherit patterns? Well, we know when we're children, from the age of birth till about 3 or 4, we're like sponges, and we just absorb everything that the people around us are doing. We're like sponges, right? So we take in their behavior patterns, how they speak, how they talk. And I think there was a psychologist that I was listening to recently that says that the child's only thing is to not sever the connection to the parent. They're in survival mode from that time period, because their life depends on their connection to their parent. So they will always behave what they seem or perceive as favorable, what their parents like. They won't do anything that contradicts that, because they are afraid that that connection will be severed. And so between the ages of 0 and 4, basically, we are just observing, and not necessarily consciously, but unconsciously. So we're taking in all this information that's coming at us. It's like it sticks on the wall and it stays. And we take on these roles in our lives based on what we see our parents do, what we see our culture, our nationality do, our thoughts, our behavior patterns, our what's the word I'm looking for? Like, hmm, attitudes. Our attitudes come from those around us. And as we get older and we're able to critically think, what really is supposed to take place is we begin to look at our attitudes, our behaviors, our mindsets, and our affiliations. We're supposed to look at those things and see if they actually fit who we are, who we are becoming. But what most people do is they never really critically look or analyze why they're doing something, why they say what they say, why they're doing what they're doing, and they just take it on and live life that way. This is what people would say, where you're basically living not your life, but your parents' lives or your grandparents' lives, because you haven't taken the time to critically assess why you're doing what you are doing. And so with behavior patterns, my mom says this often to me. She's like, well, my mom did it, so what's wrong with it? And I was like, well, does it really function for you? Does it really work in your favor? Does it really propel you forward? And if the behavior or the thinking doesn't propel you forward, then why aren't you expanding your mind to change or adjust that information, or radically removing it altogether if it doesn't function or work for you? And a lot of people really refuse to do that. And so what you'll find, I when I was working at a nonprofit, I had to take this class called, I think it's called Bridges Over Poverty. And the psychologist in that class, or the sociologist in that class, was saying that when you come from a family of poverty, they make it very, very difficult for you to break free from that mindset or that behavior pattern. So if you want something different or something better for your life, then you'll get comments like, oh, you think you're better than us, or, you think you're so smart, you're so educated, and, go out. And what most people do is they are very attached to their family of origin, and they don't want there to be any sort of even if it's dysfunctional, they don't want there to be any sort of break or what's the word? Not break, but friction between them and their family. And so these comments are a way of causing us to basically submit to the generational narrative of we're poor and we're going to be that way forever, and so will you, period. And we see this play out in many different ways. The other thing too is systems have been created in our societies across the board, whether it's supremacy, whether it's racism, sexism, ism, whatever. They have been created to keep us in an illusionary state and to keep us from growth, which is why it's futile to fight against those systems. The purpose of those systems is to do exactly what they do. One of my favorite movies, by the way, guys, I'm only giving you kind of like a gloss over of scripts and narratives. At some point, I will go more in detail, but I really just want to kind of give you an idea of what these things are. And I'm going to give you anecdotes over the course of me talking here so that you can kind of go research it for yourself. There are books out there, there are topics like on YouTube from experts that'll talk about these things. And I'll make sure I put them down in the description box on this YouTube video so that you too can go and research it. I am not an expert on these things. These are things that I've just been studying for the last few years, but I did not go to school for them. They're just things that I know based on those people that I've studied with who are experts. At some point, I hope to find someone to come on these podcasts to give more enlightenment around it. But the purpose of these topics is to hopefully spark like a desire to discover more about yourself and the world around you and what is being said. Because I think in order for us to be transformed or for us to truly walk in who we are meant to be, we have to be curious. Okay. So I don't know. I went on a tangent and I can't remember what I was talking about. Yes, I do. Okay. So scripts, like I said, are predetermined. Okay. Predetermined roles that we are placed in, that we play out without much thought or consciousness when we are unwilling to be mindful or take the time to really critically analyze or assess why we do the things that we do. And so things just play out in a crazy way, right? So there are a couple of spiritual like scriptures or sayings that I would love to just press upon here that backs up this information about scripts. And one of them is from the Torah or the Bible as we know it, and it's Proverbs 23:7, and it says, "For whatever a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." And the translation is, "Whoever you believe you are, backed by who you say you are, you will become." And then the other one comes from the Dhammapada, which is the Buddhist scriptures, and there's two verses, and it's Dhammapada 1, 2 through 3, and it says, "Thought precedes all mental states. That thought is their chief. They are all constructs of the mind. If with an unclear mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. Thought precedes all mental states. Thought or awareness is their chief. They are all constructs of the mind. If with a clear mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never departing shadow." And so for me, both of these spiritual ideas are basically explaining that in order for you to live a life that is conducive to growth and abundance and bliss, because in Tantra we're taught that we are meant to be blissful beings, then the only way that that can happen is if you have a clear mind. And to have a clear mind, you must be willing to take the time to assess your behavior. Also, the way that you think about yourself, the things that you say about yourself becomes your reality. And so this is what scripts and narratives do. Our reality, I know I've been in a situation where I felt like life was happening to me. Like, what the hell? How am I repeating what my mom did, my grandmother did? How is my life repeating when I have been determined to do it differently? And what I did not understand at that time, but grew to understand, is I had imprinted their behavior patterns onto myself, and I basically have been living them out unconsciously. And so this is why mindfulness, which is an ancient Asian concept, and I mean Asian like all of Asia concept of mindfulness in Tantra is called choding, where you spend some time and you reflect and you introspect and you look at why you're doing things or your behavior, and you assess whether that behavior is you wearing a mask or trying to prevent pain by presenting what I call the emissary, which is the person you send out in advance to represent you. We all do this. We bring our emissaries into our conversations, into our daily lives, into our relationships, which is a representative of who we actually are while we hide behind them. And this is like when, for me, for example, I am more of a person who likes quiet time, being alone, and spending time alone, and watching movies. I'm a little bit most people would say boring, but I love to travel. I love to experience other cultures and other food and all that stuff. But what I would always present to people is a very loud, boisterous, jovial person, when inside what I really wanted to do was just be like, man, just go away, or really, you said that. I wanted to be more straight. I'm more straightforward, and I say what I think, but I was taught in Texas, that you're supposed to be nice, and you're supposed to, not be so direct. And I have had friends who always said that I hurt their feelings when I was being so direct. And so it kind of put me in this sort of box of always pretending or compensating with the nice person, the nice face. And then because I was unable to be who I truly was, I was choosing, because it's about choice. I was choosing not to be my authentic self. Then I would go behind closed door and gossip versus just being honest and telling my truth. And so this is what I mean by narratives and scripts as well. Is we conform to what society says we should be. Another example of this, I don't know. I was watching Taylor Swift's Miss Americana movie or documentary on Netflix, and she talks about this same phenomenon, how she was raised to be a good girl, and a good girl doesn't talk about her politics. A good girl doesn't ruffle feathers. A good girl just says thank you and yes and waves and smiles. And her whole life was built on the getting the approval of her audience and others, and therefore she was literally basically dying on the inside. And it wasn't until she was confronted by several things that she really had to let go of the narrative that she was playing a part in, of the role that she was playing a part in, which was the role of the good girl. So going forward, it would be what I hope, as I continue to talk, because there's several other points I need to make, you will begin to kind of introspect. You could begin to take a couple of deep breaths, look at yourself, go, Why do I do this? Why am I behaving this way? And sometimes we tend to know, but we don't take the time to adjust or change our behaviors. So this is also another thing. It's good to be aware, but when you're not making the effort or doing the work to adjust or refrain something, then the awareness is unnecessary. It doesn't work. It doesn't function for you, or all it does. And what I find too, though, I will say this, what I do find is being aware can be hell, because once you become aware of something, you cannot be unaware. I think someone says once you ring the bell, you can't unring the bell. It's very true. And so if you are wanting to be more authentic and be yourself, and that means being aware. Make sure you are ready for that journey, because once you become aware, it is very, very difficult to go back to being blissfully ignorant, as they would say. With that being said, another example of narratives or scripts or roles is the movie The Matrix, which is like one of my favorite movies of all times. And I remember when I saw this movie in 1999, 2000 ish. I remember watching it and getting these like aha moments watching it, even though those things did not materialize until about 20 years later, because I didn't really know what to do with the information. And over the journey, because I kept seeking, I felt like the universe was leading me to places where I was getting the information I need to help me grow and to let go and to peel off the crap that was holding me back. Not necessarily crap. I don't want to judge it. Okay. Not necessarily crap. Let's just say to peel off those layers of things that, fuck it, call it shit. It's shit, y'all. It is. Because it stinks and it literally just piles on and you can't function or move through it. Okay. I don't like to flour coat or sugarcoat things, right? It's shit. And I was aware of certain things, but because I was in these patterns that I just didn't know how to break until I started doing transformation work, until I went to the ashram, until I was going to therapy. I was just so aware of it, which made me absolutely miserable because it was crap. And I needed to clear it, to clean it off, to peel it off. Um, so the Matrix. Let's get back to the Matrix. Neo, who is the protagonist in the film, um, the avatar that he projects onto his life, because the Matrix represents the material world. The Matrix means the mother. So in a way, you can look at the Matrix as this material world that we live in day to day, and the emissary is the avatar that we project into the world, that shields us from having to reveal who we truly are authentically. And so for Neo, his avatar was some business guy who, a computer guy who worked at a 9 to 5 desk job every single day that he absolutely hated, what was boring to him. And on the side, he did like what we would call like black market things for people for money, so black market computer programming or gaming or whatever he was doing. They don't really go into detail what he was doing. You just know he was kind of hacking stuff or whatever. And who he truly was someone who he felt was probably a bit rebellious against the construct that was created in society for him to live in. And he just knew that something was not quite right with the world he was in, but because he had no point of reference or he didn't know exactly what he was experiencing, he just continued to live life, accordingly. And it wasn't until Trinity showed up that the spark happened, that, oh my God, I've been living a lie. And this here is the truth. And though the truth is stark, I prefer to accept this truth than to continue to live this lie attached to this machine that basically drains me of my life force. And then there was another guy in the film who had been disconnected and now aware of the truth, but he did not want to do the work to stay to grow and to stay aware. He wanted to be plugged in, but like they said, once you ring the bell, you cannot ring it. And they said that most people, when they get plugged back in, they go crazy. But he didn't care. He wanted to be plugged back in, and so he basically sabotaged the team. Now, what's beautiful about this story is how Neo was learning how to fight, was learning who he was. He was coming into who he was. He even went to the Oracle, and the Oracle basically says to him, kid, know thyself. You are who you say you are. And when he asked if he was the one, she was like, I'm sorry, kid, blah, blah, blah. But what she was saying to him is, you don't believe this is who you are. Therefore, you are not this person or this thing that everyone is telling you that you are. And I know that many of us in our day-to-day life, we may have had people tell us, my God, you have this talent or this gift. And you're just looking at them like you're crazy because they're seeing something in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself, or that you're refusing to accept about yourself because you don't want to stand out from the crowd. And so with Neo, he was being told or suggested that he was the one. So he went to the Oracle to discover or to find out if he really was the one. And she basically was like, no, kid, you're not. You're going to have to sacrifice yourself for this other guy, et cetera, et cetera. But she wasn't lying. He wasn't at that moment the one because he did not believe that he was. And she had a sign over the door that says, know thyself, basically, right? And so going forward, Neo is going through this whole process, or basically believing he has to sacrifice himself for the leader of the rebellion, and he is trying to fight against the system, in which he ends up dying or becoming a martyr to the system. It is not until Trinity reminds him of who he truly is that he transcends the system and he transcends this reality. And he understands that I don't actually need to fight this system. I need to transcend it, because fighting it only leads to death. And so he transcended and destroyed the matrix, or the as I call them, the gatekeepers of the matrix, in that particular moment, even though they keep coming back, and because you can't destroy a system. You can only maybe put a hole in it for a minute. You can make it set back for a generation, but it comes back full force with the same crap. And so at the end of the movie, he actually says, hey, I didn't come to save you or free you, but I came to give you the information you need in order to free yourself. I am basically here for you. And what we have to understand is there are no saviors on this plane. We cannot save others. We can only save ourselves. But what we can do is help others, or give, or not even help them, but share with them like your experiences, the tools that you've learned, the information you learned, giving them directions to the information so that they can make their own conclusions, so they can work out their own sort of salvation on their own, because that is the only way that we free ourselves from these narratives and scripts. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's path is different. Therefore, we cannot tell each other what to do on said journey or path. And so that's what Neo was saying at the end of the film. Now, the guy who wanted to be plugged in went through all that trouble trying to sabotage it so that he can get what he wanted, and end up dying anyway. Trinity, I think, represents those people in our lives that see us for who we are, even when we're pretending, and that basically calls us on it or tell us the truth. Okay. And I actually think I might go back and watch The Matrix this week sometime, because I love it. I like watch it at least once every 3 to 4 months, because I just love it, and I get new understanding of life in general. And I know that sounds silly because it's just a film, but I really believe that, art imitates life, and that, there are a lot of ways that we get information, whether it's from spiritual texts, whether it's from studying in school, whether it's from sitting and introspecting and getting what people call downloads, or inspiration or intuition. Sometimes it's music, sometimes it's film, but we all get what we need to hear or the information we need through various mediums. And so basically, the Matrix teaches us you free yourself by knowing yourself, and the only way you can know yourself is to be completely honest with yourself and authentic. The old saying, you cannot lie to yourself, which is very true. You cannot. Even when you try, your body and your mind are like, no. And a lot of things we forget, and this is what I had an issue with. I used to be a very mind brainy person. Like, I was always trapped in my mind, and a lot of times I become paralyzed there. I did not include the intuitive information that my body provided, which is why I ended up going to the ashram in the first place, because I understood on some deep level that I needed to engage my body into my life and my journey, in order to understand what was going on, because our bodies tell us a lot, and this is what they mean by mindfulness. And in order to know thyself, to free thyself, you will need to practice some sort of mindfulness, whether it's and not just meditation, by the way. Mindfulness it goes a little bit further than meditation. Mindfulness is really, really engaging yourself, like sitting down and really assessing yourself, not from a judgmental point of view, but from a place of kindness and compassion, and a place of observance. You're observing your behavior, and then you are analyzing why you're doing what you're doing. And I don't mean it like analyzing, I mean like really being honest and looking at your behavior and going, oh, why am I doing that? Am I trying to protect myself, or have I inherited this behavior from somewhere and I'm just acting out something that I was taught that I don't even know that works for me or not? So mindfulness is this process, and like I said, in Tantra we call it choding. It is a process of peeling the onion, or peeling the layers off, taking off the mask, taking off the cultural, familial, whatever structures that we have allowed ourselves to put on, in order for us to fit in the compensations that we have taken on because of a lack of confidence in ourselves, or this fear of being exposed, etc. And so, in order for us to free ourselves, we must know ourselves. And so that takes time, that takes practice, that takes the ability to be vulnerable, or the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to be open, the willingness to be curious, especially curiosity. A lot of times we will cut ourselves off at the knees, because we are rushing to label something as good, bad, or indifferent, versus asking ourselves, so why are you doing that? Why are you acting this way? Why does this trigger you? What's happening? Instead of judging our behavior, we're curious about our behavior. I'm going to put a book down. I haven't read it yet, but I actually heard a lady, I think on the Goop podcast, talking about this very thing about, kindness and compassion. And I'll put the link down, because I think she's an expert. She's been studying this for 20 years. And she'll be the person that you can listen to. This information that I'm giving you is based on things that I've just experienced. And then when I'm studying like these spiritual paths, or these, transformational information, that I come to this information too. But there are people out there who are experts on this, and you can get more information, which will hopefully help you. Like I said, I'm just a messenger. I'm just here to provide the information, and then I hope that you would take what I provide and go research on your own, so that you can come to your own conclusion. Because my conclusions, or my assessments change, or attitudes or beliefs change over time, because as I get more information, then I have to adjust the lens or the way that I'm seeing things. And so today I may be saying one thing, and a month or two later, when I get more information, I'm like, oh, let me adjust what I was saying. So I prefer to just give you guys the information, so then you can go and research and study for yourself, so you can come to your own conclusion based on your personal needs for your life and your journey. So introspection is a very important thing. Um, I personally believe in therapy. I think therapy is an amazing thing. I believe in spiritual paths being combined with therapy. Whether, and when I say spiritual, guys, I'm not talking religion. And specifically, I'm talking like whether it's like yoga or mindfulness or meditation or prayer or dancing or reading your scriptures or whatever it may be. I believe that in the combination of those two really do help us. And I do believe that involving your body in some sort of way, whether it's yoga, Tai Chi, or some sort of martial arts like Kung Fu, these are very ancient spiritual, physical things that allow you to, or practices that allow you to bring all of you together, your mind, your soul, your body, into one place so that you're grounded. So now that you know yourself, or you are beginning to know yourself by stripping away your compensations that keep you from really expressing who you truly are, your authentic self, you can now begin to flip the script. You can now begin to master your fate. And that basically just means you are stepping out of the system. You are removing yourself from the role. You are not allowing yourself to play the game. And there are several people in the world that come from one thing and should have been those things, but figured out over time how to flip the script. One of those people is Oprah Winfrey. I absolutely love using her as an example, because Oprah was born into basically a shack in the middle of rural town, Mississippi, where she grew up being molested and raped by two family members. At one point, when she was 13, she got pregnant, and then she miscarried that child, or she gave birth to a stillborn baby. I think it was the story. And yet, here is she, one of the most powerful media moguls in the world. How did she get there? If she was not willing to basically follow her path, let go of the narrative, because she could have easily taken on the narrative that she was a victim, right? Because that is a narrative. Okay, that's not an actual script. That a narrative is a part of the script. It is a like a scene in the script. That's what I should have said at the beginning. And the narrative is a screen in this. They're intertwined. So the narrative is a scene or a group of scenes in the script. And she could have definitely taken on the narrative of being a victim, of being impoverished, of being oppressed because she was a black, dark skinned woman. She could have easily taken on that narrative, but she chose to flip the script and not play a role in the script that was handed to her. Instead, she decided that she was going to write her own. And that is why she has gotten to where she is. That's what I mean by flipping the script. You have, or mastering your fate. You have the power to write your own story. But it requires you to be willing to strip away all of the layers that was placed upon you based on the environment you grew up in, and doing something different, or wanting something different. A lot of people like to say, oh, I'm just different from everybody else. I used to say that. That's an actual narrative. I'm special. I'm different. Listen, I say this now. I said none of us are special, and we all are special. That is also a narrative that you could take on, then that creates a certain kind of persecution, et cetera, et cetera. Rather than say I'm different, I now prefer to say I want something different than what my family had, what my friends had, and I'm willing to be different or to do things differently to have them. And that's what Oprah did. And that is why she is in the position she is in today. Another person is Maya Angelou. I remember when I was on Facebook, I'm no longer on Facebook, a few years ago, and I was telling the story about how Maya Angelou was once a sex worker. And a lot of people were like, "Are you kidding me? Why are you blaspheming Maya Angelou?" And they were shocked. Maya Angelou was a sex worker. That was one of the scenes that she played in the story of her life. And Maya Angelou could have easily just stayed in that situation of being abused or whatever what was going on in that situation. But again, she decided to flip the script. She decided to rewrite the story. You have the pen in your hand. And that's what she did. Now she is the most searched female poet in the world, and no one will forget the stories that she has told. She had to start telling herself a different story. That's not to ignore what she had gone through, that's not to ignore her experiences, but she had to create a different relationship to her experiences. She was no longer a victim, she was someone who experienced victimization. She was not someone who was oppressed, she was someone who experienced oppression. You see, the language is very different um, when you start to readjust how you're speaking about yourself or what you were saying, because everything you say, that is you penning the script or the story. Um, Another person, which is more which is more modern or right now, is Harry and Meghan. Harry was taught from a very young age that his life was duty bound to the heir to the throne, which means that his entire life, no matter what, he was duty bound to the heir to the throne and the queen and to the monarchy of England. And that means that his reputation, what he wanted in life, all of those things had to come secondary. His family had to come secondary to the crown, which is the basically the narrative that his grandmother, basically the role she played in her script. That was the role she played. She sacrificed her family's happiness for that crown, and he was expected to do the same thing. But then Harry met and married Meghan Markle, and they both tried to basically play a role in this script that was given to Harry from a very young age. And then they chose that it did not work for them because it was not authentic to who they authentically were. And they decided to flip the script, master their fate, and walk away. They gave up everything that everyone thought that were supposed to want and need and would fight and die for. And they were like, nope, you can have it, take it back. I don't want it. This is not my life. My life is a X, Y, and Z. We still don't know what that is yet, and I'm looking forward to finding out. But they walked away from the script. They basically took the pen into their hands and said, "We're going to rewrite this. This is not who we are. Therefore, we do not have to submit to it." Okay. Um, Another narrative is European colonization. After the Dark Ages, the Europeans was trying to create an identity for themselves, which started from the top down. So it started with those with money, the crowns, the monarchies, the aristocrats, etc. And they had to create a narrative or a script about who they were as Europeans, then as white people. By the way, this term black and white didn't come about until like the 1500s, guys. So it's very new. It's a very new understanding. Most people only identified by the ethnicity or the tribal people that they came from. And so the Europeans had to create a narrative to prop them up as being supreme. Therefore, they needed to conquer the world of people who were darker than them to civilize them, because obviously they were savages. This is the language that was used. I'm not making this up. Okay. Now this is where I really study. This is the historian over here. This is the stuff that I actually did study. And so how did they do it? Well, they went around the world, conquering the world, the Commonwealth, so to speak, the colonization, enslaving people, destroying whole nations and cultures, destroying their ancient buildings and like what's the word of like identity, and forcing them to take on the identity of the various Western and some Northwestern European countries. And This is how white supremacy was birthed. And eventually the Nazi party was birthed, was from this script or idea of being supreme because you were European. And those ideas, even though they're 500 years old, are still echoing across the world today. We're still struggling to walk out of this script. I know as a black person in America, it is a script. Like a lot of black people walk around saying they are oppressed. I refuse to say I am oppressed. I will say I've had experienced oppression. I have experienced discrimination. I have experienced racism, but I will not say that I am oppressed. I refuse. I refuse to take on that narrative for my life. In fact, I had to go through this process, which is what caused me to start really going through this, like the transformational work, going to the ashram, researching, studying, understanding how to get out of these mindsets or patterns or behaviors, was because in 2015, when we were going through the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I got so angry at the silence of others who were not experience the same sort of oppression and murder in America, that I began to hate my friends who were not black. And I had got to the point where I was just like, oh my God, this is not me. This is not who I am. I had gotten so depressed. And I remember spending a weekend after the whole shooting of the nine in South Carolina by Dylan Roof, and I was on the phone with one of my high school friends who's from El Salvador, and I remember us just crying on the phone, going, "What the hell?" Because growing up in Houston in Alief, Texas, I grew up with a lot of people of multi nationalities: Indian, Vietnamese, Pakistani, Middle Eastern, Mexican, Latin from other Latin American countries, Filipino, you named it, we had it in our high school. And we were all very close and tight knit. We didn't view each other as different in the respect of inferior or superior. And so when we went out into the world and we ended up running into this sort of script in the world, or these stories in the world, we were just like, what the hell is happening? And so I remember being on the phone with my friend and crying with him all weekend, and we just couldn't. We were flabbergasted that this sort of behavior would take place in America. And mind you, this was during the time we had what people would call our first black president, meaning that we are post-racial, etc. Obviously, I didn't believe that crap, but I understood why people wanted to celebrate it. And so I personally, for 3 years, basically came off of social media. I stopped watching the news because I do have my master's degree in mass communication and media, where you learn about how the news use propaganda to control. And I decided to stop watching the news. I stopped being on social media because I didn't want to keep seeing the images of the police killing these unarmed Black people or Latinos or Native American, which was feeding the narrative of being oppressed in me. And so I walked away from it. It doesn't mean that those things are not happening in the world. It just means that I've chosen not to play a role in that particular script or narrative in the world. Instead, I've decided to go on this journey and this path of stripping away or walking away from what it means to what it universally means to be Black and to be a woman, and decided that I was going to write the narrative that of being a Black woman, what that meant to me, and then hopefully share with people where I got the information or the understanding of these things, and hopefully they'll be able to also free themselves from the construct that has been created for them. Um, and then family. We know that, for example, for me with my family, for many generations, women have been giving birth to children with absent fathers, and so that was a narrative that I decided early on that I was not going to play a role in. Even then, I didn't know that's what I was doing, but even then, I was like, nah, I'm good, because I grew up without a father, and I didn't want to recreate that storyline or that narrative in my life. And so I rejected it wholeheartedly. And I was like, this is not authentic to me. Now, what I took on instead also wasn't authentic to me. And it took me many years to figure that out as well. So I've said a lot. I know this is about an hour long. I didn't mean for it to be this long. The original was 37 minutes. But I hope that you are able to hear my heart. I know I may not have explained some things technically correct or academically correct. However, like I said, down in the description box, there will be some books by experts or a podcast by an expert that talks about these things that you yourself can go listen to and then determine how you will use it going forward to improve your life. And until next time, till the next salon topics, which will be next Monday, I will have it out then. If you know anyone who may be an expert in the realm of whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or spirituality or therapy or whatever it may be, who would like to be on this podcast so we can have these discussions and they can give more concrete information based on their own research or their own studies, please feel free to either contact me on Twitter at the Queen Maker, or I think it's at the Queen underscore Maker, or at my email address, sincerelytanisha at gmail.com. That will change soon to Fariente, but I haven't done that yet. But yeah, you can email me. I'll put it down in the subscription box, or the description box, excuse me, description box. But that it's sincerelytanisha at gmail.com. I hope this conversation has been enlightening. Bye bye.